you're not talking, I just asked that you mute yourself so that we don't hear any background noise. But I will be monitoring if there's any questions down below, and feel free to type stuff in there as we're going, and I'll try to answer it as I can. Just so you know who Netwoven is and why are you dealing with Netwoven and you're not dealing with Nintex directly. Nintex only sells through partners. They don't sell direct. So one of the things that we are is we're the #1 Nintex partner in the Silicon Valley. We work in a lot of different technologies company-wide. We have over 100 employees. I'm one of the employees that focuses strictly on Nintex. So when you take a look at some of the things that we do other than Nintex, you can see that we do a lot of services. We are founded by some colleagues of mine from Microsoft that I worked with a while back. So on the screen you can get a detailed view of my background. I am a Nintex solution architect, and what that basically means is all I do is Nintex. I don't dabble in anything else, and my whole goal is to make you successful at using this product. And hopefully today, I think the reason that most of you joined is probably you have a little bit of experience with SharePoint, you have a little bit of experience with possibly InfoPath, and you'd like to see what this whole Nintex solution is all about and why people are so interested in it as a replacement for a lot of the standard out-of-the-box tools like SharePoint Designer, and also looking at how we migrate from working with on-premise SharePoint to Office 365, and how do we deal with hybrid environments as well. So I'll kind of cover that today as I show you what's going on with Nintex. One of the biggest things you'll find here with Netwoven, and one of the reasons that we are successful with Nintex, is that last bullet item. We do have a lot of exceptional Nintex customer references if needed, and we'd like to also make sure that you become one of them. So we don't just sell you a license and walk away. We provide training. We have services available. There's just a lot of things we can do to help you be successful with this product. Now, the reason that most people are looking at using Nintex, if you take a look at this graph right here, and I'm sure if you go down the line, you could check almost every one of these items that you do this on a daily basis, most likely. But this is someone that's an information worker, and you can see everything in blue is kind of personal productivity. So more of the things that you do personally are around probably in blue. Whenever you're collaborating with a team, then everything in yellow applies. So on average, a really busy person, one person will spend about 50+ hours a week doing these. So this is all for one person right here, and the whole idea is to be able to use something that will make people more productive, especially in the SharePoint environment. I don't want to try to make SharePoint sound like it's this great place and great environment. Most people, like myself, were very resistive to using SharePoint, and most people still are. It's can be very hard to navigate if the information structure or architecture is not set up to help people negotiate how to get around, and that's one of the things that Nintex can really help with. So let me start with this slide, which you were seeing in the beginning. What do you get out of the box with Nintex? So the first thing you're going to get out of the box is Nintex workflow. These workflows and everything that you do is done inside the browser, right? So when we create workflows, when we create forms, we're not installing anything like you do with InfoPath. Once you acquire a license, you're able to run the product inside the browser, and also be able to go in there and create different types of workflows on different platforms. So we're not just talking about creating workflows in SharePoint on-premise and SharePoint in Office 365. We're also talking about being able to create workflows in the cloud. We do have a cloud engine that has no dependencies on having SharePoint installed. So if you're doing something where it's a workflow or business process automation, but it's not related to SharePoint, we do have a workflow engine that's included as part of your license. So everything that I'm showing you today, you get out of the box with Nintex. Okay, form creation, that's for the desktop. That's also for mobile devices as well. So we can create forms just like you do an info path. Again, we're doing this through the browser, and there's some new capabilities that were just added in the last couple months that I'll elaborate on and get more detailed on in a couple slides. Nintex Mobile, if you take a look at your phone right now and you go to your store and search for Nintex Mobile is an application that you install on your device. It doesn't matter what type of device you have, tablet, Android, iPhone, doesn't matter. You install Nintex Mobile, and any form in your SharePoint environment or in the workflow cloud environment that you have exposed to be as a mobile form will show up on your device. So no longer a need for people to be sitting at their desktop to fill out an expense report or some kind of survey or any type of application that you push out to a mobile device. It'll automatically show up on that person's device if they have access to it in SharePoint. Okay, really, really cool feature that most people are not aware of, how easy it is to create mobile applications. The next thing is the connectors, being able to connect to Salesforce.com, Microsoft Dynamics, you name it, there's a connector to be able to connect to it. Most people want to be able to do DocuSign, so there's DocuSign connectors included in there. The next thing is document generation, and I have my next slide is about document generation, but this is the whole idea of being able to take data that's going through a business process and saying, I want to generate a document based on all the data I have, whether it's coming from a database or any back-end system. Let me go ahead and be able to send a document out and generate that from a template. So I can start in Word and I can end up in PDF or Word. I can combine documents together. I have a slide that'll show that. So let me just go ahead and finish right here. The last thing here is Nintex Hawkeye, and what most people aren't aware of is that Nintex Hawkeye is basically a data warehouse in the cloud for Nintex. So when you're creating a form and the user hits submit and then you have a big business process on the back end that's running, we can actually store data points in the database, in the Nintex Hawkeye database, and then we can report on it later using something like Power BI, Tableau, or something like that. Just to elaborate a little bit more on Nintex document generation, a lot of people have looked for simple solutions like Mohimbi for doing stuff where we generate a document from a template and from data. The whole idea here is, and I'll give you a scenario that's a very realistic scenario. Let's say you're creating an HR application. The HR application, you need to send out an employment information document to 3 different types of employees: full-time, part-time, and contractor. Well, with Nintex document generation, what we can do is we can have multiple templates. We can have up to 20 templates, and within those 20 templates, what we can do is we can say include this template if we have a certain condition. So conditional inclusion, and what you're basically doing is you have this template with open tags in it, and you can actually take data like you're seeing on the screen from any data source and plug that in. So you might do something like certain verbiage gets included or excluded in the scenario that I was giving you with a part-time versus contractor, and we can say that, hey, in this template I want to make this change to these values, but in the case of a contractor, maybe I need to have a whole separate document that's just related to contractors. So what I can do in my workflow is I can dynamically include and exclude based on fields that have been filled out. So if someone's filling out, let's say HR is filling out a form, they might indicate through a button or a radio button saying this is a full-time employee, this is a part-time employee. And if they're full-time or part-time, maybe they get something like a benefits document that we can include in there. Now, all these documents, when they come in a certain data format, they can go out in PDF, Excel, PowerPoint. You just have a bunch of different ways to be able to do that, even in Word. So it doesn't always have to be PDF. but the whole thing you should take away from this is the ability to dynamically include, exclude, and create documents, and this is out-of-the-box functionality within Nintex in all three cases: on-premise, SharePoint Online, and also Nintex Workflow Cloud. Now, I talked about some new capabilities with being able to design forms. I'm going to show this to you when we get into the demonstration and I create a solution. But the whole idea is, on the right-hand side, you always had this capability of creating a classic form. So what is a classic form? A classic form is like your info path form, or think about a PDF, where we could take a PDF and make a pixel-perfect copy of that form, and that was what would be presented to the user, where we can move stuff around, we can go pixel perfect as far as the width and all the different layouts that we want to do. That was kind of the classic form capability. Now they've added something called responsive forms, and as you read it down in the lower left, you can see that the form itself is dynamic and the controls are dynamic as well. So you can't do stuff like lay one control on top of another. You can't do something that would push a control outside the boundaries of the form. And the cool thing about this is, with a responsive form, you create one form and it works on any device. So that'll work on your mobile device, it'll work on your desktop, it'll work on your tablet. In classic forms, you have to create a form to target each device. So you might have to create up to 3 forms, one for the desktop, one for the mobile phone, and one for the tablet. Most people create a mobile phone version and a desktop version, but responsive forms is definitely something new, and it'll basically save you about 75% of your time you'll save, because the responsive form is so much easier to create. So responsive forms are great for your medium to simple complexity forms. When you get into super complex forms where pixel perfect placement is required, then you probably want to go the classic form route. And this is just a picture of what you're looking at on the screen right here is just a picture of a responsive form where the controls are laid out very symmetric. If you were to draw a line down the center and create a grid, that's basically what it does, is it allows you to drag and drop controls into a hidden grid. And so when things need to move around on a different device, title might be on top of company, and email, they might be all in a line if they were going to be on a mobile device that's very small. So it would adapt automatically to be able to do that for you. You have the ability to do a bunch of different processes here. So when you start taking a look at the kinds of things, and I have another slide that kind of shows you the top 5 of every department you can do. What I want you to take away from this is, when you look at that person that's sitting there, usually the IT pro is the person that's kind of the bottleneck for creating forms. One great thing about Nintex is the simplicity of it. Even though it does have the capability to get complex for doing more complex stuff, but most of the simple stuff you can do with just a little bit of training. It's not one of these developer type of products. There is no code being written, and it's all running on top of SharePoint, so there's no external code or anything being run or generated like that. So definitely keeps you away from that whole development factor. What we're going to do today is I'm actually going to create a leave request just to give you an idea of someone filling out a form. That form is going to go to a manager. We're going to introduce something to you called lazy approval, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we'll go through this whole process here of even updating a centralized team calendar here. The only thing I won't be doing is the lower left, the lower right side here, where we're talking to that back-end system, because I don't have a back-end system to talk to right now. But the whole idea here is this is out-of-the-box capability of being able to update the back-end systems as well, so we can do full integrations end-to-end. On the workflow side, one thing that's great about this workflow tool that you're using is, again, it's all done in the browser. Your skill set works on both on-premise, Office 365 SharePoint, and also Nintex Workflow Cloud, where once you understand that we're dragging and dropping actions from the left-hand side onto the screen on the right-hand side, you can see that we can build something, a very simple but powerful workflow like you see here, where we're sending an email notification to someone, we're assigning a task to a manager, the manager approves or rejects. If the manager approves, we update a record in CRM, this could be Salesforce or Dynamics, or we delete the item. Maybe the item in the SharePoint list that we added as a new prospect is not legitimate, so we're going to decline it. So it's a very simple common pattern that a lot of people end up using like this to be able to create a business process, and this will give you real-time status. And again, what I really want you to take away from this is that we're not coding, we're not writing any code. This is just dragging and dropping and setting properties. The whole idea here too is that when we're creating, when we're trying to automate any type of request, and that's what I wanted you to take away from this slide, is a lot of people don't understand. It's like, how does a workflow even start? What's the connection between a form and a workflow? Well, a workflow, if you look at my cursor here, hopefully, let's see, let me put a pen here. If you look at settings up here in the top in the toolbar, you have settings that can be set for the ways that a workflow should start. So if you think about a document library or a SharePoint list, someone inputs some information. So we have basically 3 different ways that we can start a workflow that will kick off this workflow to run. One of them is on the creation of a new entry. One of them is on a modification. And the third one is actually on a timer. We can set a timer to run a workflow as well. There is actually one other way, and we can do it manually. So there's actually 4 ways to be able to create and start a workflow. So let's say that for someone that's going to request a time off, that we would probably look at setting the settings to start on creation. The user submits a form. That form sends an email to the user saying, hey, we've received your request, it's under review. That would go to the manager. We can dynamically set it up so it goes to the proper manager. The manager would approve or reject a task, and based on that, in this situation, we're just sending an email to say you've been approved or rejected, while in reality, under approved, we probably do a lot of other things inside of SharePoint once that's been approved. So that's just one of the things that we can do there. Okay. Lazy approval, you'll notice that the workflow hasn't changed. Lazy approval is just a checkbox inside of the task. What lazy approval allows us to do is respond to the task via email. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that if you're a manager, and this is what your managers will love, is the fact that if someone puts in a request, let's say for a time off or an expense report, if you have enough information in the email task sent to you, you can just respond and say that, yes, I'm approving or rejecting based on an email response. There's a new capability in Office 365 that allows you to actually have actionable buttons. So instead of just replying with yes, no, okay, approve, rejected with a bunch of terms that you can use, you can actually just hit a button on your mobile device and say I'm approving this or I'm rejecting it, and I can also put a comment in there. So the reason that managers love this is because we're not having to worry about people being chained to their desktops to be able to do business and accept and reject different types of tasks that are being sent to them. So that's a really great thing. I wanted to point out something here. I was just showing you in the previous slide. You can see it's a very simple thing where we have one task that's going to one manager. The workflow basically ends after approval or rejection. Okay? So one of the things about Nintex is the ability to say, I want to have a multi-level dynamic workflow. The way this works, this is a requisition right here. Someone submits a requisition. It goes through the first level approval, second level approval for finance, and then third level approval. And you could see with third level approval, we have basically a statement that says if it's greater than $10,000, we go to one person, otherwise we go to another. Now, what I want you to take away from this screen is the fact that I created this workflow based on vertical swim lanes. So you can see the vertical swim lanes that has the actors at the top, and then we go through the stages down here of what needs to be done. So basically look at this as your different states or stages that you go through, and you basically have about 3 stages. Final approval could be considered 4. But when you really take a look at this, what I want you to see is how does this translate to a real workflow. So when I'm training you on this product, I'll usually teach you to do vertical swim lanes. Once you learn how to do this, which is really simple because there's only 3 shapes to work with, you can translate that to a real workflow. Here's a real workflow. Here's initial submit, first level approval, finance approval, final approval. Notice that the final approval is based on a condition. Is it greater than $10,000? Yes. If it's less than $10,000, no. Okay? So when you go back and take a look at that drawing, you can see that this product makes it very easy to be able to translate these types of business processes to an actual running or workable workflow design. This is the designer right here. On the left-hand side are all the different types of tasks that you can use, and you take these and you can drag and drop them. So what this basically does is you tell the state machine where you want to go to first. And remember, I was saying in the workflow settings, we'll tell it that we want to do this on creation. I'm not going to try to spell, but on creation, we'll start the workflow. The state machine needs to know where to start. Well, it's always going to start in initial. So we're making it always jump to the first branch. And at the bottom of every one of these branches as it goes down, there's something called change state. You can see one of those on the far right over here. I'll circle it. Here's change state on the far right. What you're not seeing at the bottom of each one of these branches is the ability to change state. So when we say that this initial state machine goes to the first branch, at the bottom there's a change state that tells it to go to C level. And at the bottom here, depending on approval or rejection, if it's approved on this task, we're going to go to this level. If this one's approved, we'll go to this level. And at the bottom, if these are approved, we'll go to the end. So there's a change state that's sitting at the bottom of every one of these that you're not seeing. But basically, let's say if the C-level approval is rejected, and the next state would be, say, jump to end. We would not jump to the next state. Now, what you should take away from this, especially for you on this meeting that understands SharePoint Designer, think about having to do a 3-level approval in SharePoint Designer. It would probably take you a good 2 to 3 weeks to really get something solid going. Here, after doing all your testing, you'd have to write a lot of code, and you'd have to write a lot of go-to statements, so that once you got C-level approval in your code, you'd say, go to this other chunk of code, and then when you got done with this, go to this chunk of code. What gets really hard is, let's say that business process changes, and we have to add yet a third condition for a certain type of request here that says maybe I need more information. So I might do something like that, requiring more information. But if you could imagine, if you were going to try to do this inside of SharePoint Designer, you'd be cutting and pasting a lot of code, and it'd be super hard to debug. And so the beauty of this is that we can see what's going on. Even when it's running, we can tell what state we're in, and we can add the dynamics to say, if we need more info, we could jump all the way back to any place that we need to, depending on how we want to route these different types of messages coming in. Okay. So that's kind of the complex side of it that we can do. When you're looking at form design, I showed you earlier. Here's actually a form that's a classic form. We have pixel perfect placement. Okay. So with this pixel perfect placement, we have the ability to move stuff around like we want to. We can do repeating sections. We can do line item totals, grand totals. We can do a lot of really cool things. The whole idea here is you create forms in the browser. On the top here, this is on-premise, and doing classic forms, you know, we can target different types of devices that you see up here. There's about 16 different devices that you can use. But this is, again, this is the ability to take forms and do a pixel perfect placement. Most situations I see where the users have to do this is when you have a company-wide form that people are used to, and you don't want to, you want to make it as painless as possible for them to move to doing stuff online. So, you know, going to an electronic form, maybe you do it in Classic just so it looks exactly what people are used to, and that's one of the options you have within this product. Okay. Nintex Mobile, again, you know, if you look on your phone and search for Nintex Mobile inside your app store, you'll see one of the really cool things about the Nintex Mobile application. Once you authenticate yourself, like I said, you will see the forms that have been published as mobile forms. It's as if you were at your desktop at work when you're really having the ability to do it on your mobile device. You can deliver pictures, videos, and other things direct into your process. So think about this. You're doing expense reports on an airplane because your wallet or purse is getting too big with the receipts. You can use your phone to take pictures of all your receipts. You can fill out your expense report, and you can do it without connectivity. And then once you get down on the ground with connectivity, you can submit that. Now, one of the great things about this is I can attach videos, like it says, pictures of my receipts. We also do barcode scanning. So any mobile device with a camera connected to it turns into a barcode scanner as well. So if your company uses barcode scanners, we will turn the mobile device into a barcode scanner to be able to give you the value of the barcode when it's actually scanned. Okay. Let me get rid of this drawings. And looking at the screens on a mobile phone, on the right is a tablet. On the left is a mobile phone. So just kind of giving you the look. Notice right in the middle here, you have different things that you can do. You can look at the tasks that are assigned to you, any forms you have access to, any drafts that you did while you were not connected or you didn't submit yet. You just partially filled out a form, but you haven't hit submit yet, and just, you know, what you have sitting in your outbox as well. So a lot of information. Again, this is a free application, and it doesn't matter how many users you have. So this is one of the great things, is that we're not talking about some complex licensing. Once you have Nintex, once you have acquired a Nintex license, you can have as many mobile users as you want to. There's no limit to the amount of users that have access to Nintex Mobile or the forms that you have as well. Okay, my last slide, I promise. Looking at Nintex Live, so I talked about, you know, having the ability to connect to other applications. So one of the things we want to be able to do is have the ability to you know, communicate, push data like from Google Drive into Box or Dropbox. There's just a bunch of different things you might do inside of a workflow that would make sense. So maybe you're generating a sales order. The sales order has to go in a specific folder in Box that gets shared with a client, and maybe if they decide they want to move forward, one of the other connectors that you're not seeing here, this is just a tip of the iceberg of connectors that are available. You might want to send them a DocuSign, and so we can eliminate the whole process of having to print something out and send it out for signature. You can take what normally takes 3 to 5 days and compress that into 45 minutes using DocuSign and integrating that with Nintex to have the business process streamlined. Okay, so let me go ahead and let's go ahead and show you some stuff here. And let me get out of normal mode, drawing mode. Okay, so what you're looking at here is I'm in SharePoint, you know, Office 365. This could be on-premise, or this could also be Nintex Workflow Cloud. Doesn't really matter. Your skill set works the same. Let's go ahead and start with a form. I'm going to create a solution here for a time off request. And I just want you to know, when you purchase Nintex, we give you a starting templates for a lot of different type of applications. So obviously we've been doing this for a long time. So when you start thinking about doing some kind of business process, before you start from scratch, or if you're thinking about doing some solution for a proof of concept, you should probably contact us and see if we've done something similar to where you can have a starting point. You know, we're happy to help you with that, especially if you're building it yourself. We can give you a bunch of examples, working examples. So anyway, time off request, title, you're familiar with SharePoint, you know title's a default, but we have a couple other things. We wanted to have for leave requests in a company, the type of request you're taking, the start date, the end date, and maybe a description, but maybe we only need a description if your leave type is of a certain type, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at creating a Nintex form here. When you install Nintex, and you can get a free 30-day trial, and you could go ahead and try this. I'm going to go ahead and say Nintex form, and it's going to come up in a second here. It's going to ask me what kind of form do you want to create. And for the sake of something that's new, instead of doing a classic form, I'm going to do a responsive form just so you can see what responsive forms are all about. So it basically does a default layout for you, right? So it took all the controls that it realized were in that SharePoint list and just lays them out from left to right: title, leave type, start date, end date, subscription, and attachments. So there's certain things I can do. I can add stuff. I can certainly add more columns. So while you're in the creation mode of a solution, I can go up here and I can add more columns if I want to, right? So if I wanted to add a status column to my workflow, I could just say, okay, I want to have a status column, and I could add that and say okay. And now under my list columns, you'll see that I have status available to me. I can take that and drag and drop it wherever I want to, along with a host of a bunch of other controls. So, you know, date and time, hyperlinks, geolocation, a lot of different things I can add in here. So what I want you to look at here is, with a responsive form, I can't take the leave type and drag it on top of title. Like if I hold the cursor right there and try to add this halfway down, it just bounces back, or it's going to go to the right. So that's kind of the cool thing about these responsive forms, is we're not dealing with pixel perfect placement. It handles it for you by basically creating a grid. So what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to say, well, I might want the title to be longer. I might want the leave type on its own line, possibly. And underneath leave type, let's go ahead and put description up here. So we can put in a description and the start and end date. So you can see I'm just dragging and dropping. Status I don't want on this, and here's where we can do attachments on the form. For this form I really don't require them, so I'm just going to delete that control. So here's my basic form. This Nintex forms title, you can always change that with your own company logo, but basically the user is going to come in here and select some stuff. Now I can go and preview this at any time, so I can say I want to see this on the desktop, you know, smartphone, however I want to. I'm just going to go ahead and generate a preview and see what this is going to look like when the user really sees it. And you know, here's the leave type: annual, sick leave, other, and then we have description. Now remember, I was saying that description is only used for if we have something with leave type of other. So I want to make some customizations here, and I wanted to show you some of the things we can do. I'm going to take description, I'm going to highlight it, and then on the right hand side, let me get rid of properties. I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to say add a rule. So on the right hand side, I'm adding a rule that's associated with this control, okay? And you'll see here's the rule name. I'll leave it to default, but it's saying when, then. So I'm going to say I want to hide description when the leave type does not equal other. So I just need to write a simple function in here, a formula. So here's the leave type. I'm saying leave type does not equal, and I put it in quotes, other, which is the selection from that control. And when I do that, now we can go back again and take a look at the preview and see if it's actually working. So if I type that out correctly, what you see is we see leave type here, but it'll only show description if it's equal to other, right? Now some other common things you might want to do is we want to make sure that the end date is never greater than the start date, all right? So I want to click on end date, and I want to go over here and add a rule. And in this situation, I want to invalidate that control, and I can put a message saying, please check end date. I'm just, forgive me, I'm not a great typer. So anyway, please check end date. It could be any message you want to. Now, what's the rule going to look like? Well, now we come in here with the name controls again, and I'm going to say if end date is less than the start date, and these are very much like what you do inside of Excel formula. That's basically what you have, is this type of VB script type of thing. But this is your worst case scenario for any kind of code you'd ever have to write. You're just writing a formula. So I'm going to state, so look at this, when end date is less than start date, I want to invalidate with a message. So let's go ahead and check that, and let's make sure that that's working. Let's generate the preview. And let's go ahead and change this to 2016. And I'm going to try to save. Notice it tells you with that control, that rule is applying to this control, so we can see that that doesn't make sense. So if we take just a 2019, I hit save. Now we're just going back to some of the common things, like title is a requirement based on there. So I can go in there and save. I could go in and put in any information I want to, and then say save. Okay, so now I'm pretty happy with this layout. It seems like it'll work for me. Maybe I want to have these controls moved around a little bit, so I can do stuff, move things around. You have some ways of doing stuff, but what I want you to know, if you've dealt with any type of creating forms before, usually you get hung up on little pixel placement. One control is one pixel higher than the other. People can see it. This allows you to do the whole thing, and then we can even print as well. So that's one of the things when we take a preview and generate the preview. I also have the ability to go ahead and print this to PDF, so we can convert that to PDF as well for people that need to print in the cases where you have that type of scenario. Okay. So if I opened it, here's our PDF of what we just did. We didn't really fill out any information, but just so you see we have that capability. So I'm happy with that. I go ahead and publish that. It's a responsive layout. I can do it in production or development. Now I'm just going to go ahead and publish this. And then what you'll see is after we publish and everything's gone okay, if I close this down, and we take a look at our time off request now, anytime I do a new now, we're going to see that we get some information here. So I could say my time off, I'm taking other, the description is my time off today, and we'll just leave those dates, and I say save, and now that's our new interface for getting that information in here. Okay. Now, I left status here because I wanted to change status based on what's going on with the workflow. And now we're going to shift into the workflow mode and see how do we create the workflow. So we go into Nintex workflow. Now remember, I told you that you got to have something that starts the workflow. How do we connect the form to the workflow? And let me go ahead and show that to you here. So I'm going to create this time off request. First thing I'm going to do, you have all these different actions that you can do. First thing I need to do with this workflow is go in here, and I need to tell it I can start manually, I can start when an item's created or modified. So I'm going to go ahead and start when an item is either, I can start it manually or when an item's created, time off workflow. 1, I'm going to call it, time off workflow 1, we'll say. And now let's go ahead and we're going to assign a task to a manager. Right, so let me show you this because this is really cool. I need to send it to someone, and it could be my manager if I wanted to. So if I look at the workflow context, I can basically have it go directly to my manager. It knows through Active Directory within your organization who your manager is when you're filling out a form. Now I could add that and insert that in there. The reason I don't want to do this is because my manager will really get that. So I'm going to make myself the manager. The task title is time off request for, and this can be dynamic as far as the task title goes. Notice on the right hand side I have all the workflow constants and variables, so I can look at the workflow context and I can put in the initiator's display name. So I put the cursor here, right here in the middle. I go to initiator's display name and double click that. This part on the right hand side, everything in red, when this is generated, it'll automatically put in my name in there. And I could put in a description if I want to. Approve, reject. Let's go ahead and take a look at lazy approval. Here's something really cool. Now, I told you that in Office 365, you have lazy approval so we can capture the outcome of the selection from the manager via email. But what we can do is we can also do it email and an actionable message, or actionable message only. So what this means is that instead of having to type in yes, no, okay, approved, denied, I can just hit a button to be able to do that. So you have the ability to do one or the other or both. What I also want you to know, because most people ask about this in doing these types of tasks, is what about reminder emails? So you also have reminder emails that go out. When we're assigning a task to someone, we get an initial email that's sent out. So here's a task title, and it says you have a task. So one of the things that you can do is that you can put in dynamic entries into the body of the email. I'm going to say time off for, and then you'll notice on the right-hand side I have all these fields. So I put the cursor in the sentence there, workflow context. I want the initiator's display name. So this is the time off for whoever the person is, and this is going to be assigned to the manager. And also, you get reminders if you want to, so you can set up reminders. So tasks is overdue, so you can set up how many reminders. I think the biggest thing too is how do we escalate? So this is all well thought out inside of Nintex as far as dealing with tasks, is reminder emails, auto completion, and escalation. So I can say that I want to escalate to a person if something happens and they don't respond within a few days. I can say, let's go ahead and move it to the next level manager. We can do nothing, or we can auto complete the task. Okay, so a lot of different things that we can do in there. So once I've done this, I can basically save this, but I want to show you one last thing, because you're probably familiar, if you're familiar with SharePoint, is SharePoint task. Now you have the ability in here to edit the task as well, the task form, and you can go classic or you can go responsive. I'm going to go responsive. This is what the manager will see if they open it up. So here's a task name. I can make that wider. I didn't have a description, so we'll just get rid of that. They can approve or reject, and then they have the access to all the different items down here, so that that manager can make a decision. What I want to say is I don't care about the title. All I care about the leave type and the start date and end date, and I don't even care about the description. I just want to know when this person is thinking about taking off time. So leave type, start date, and end date. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll save that. And now we basically have created this task, and the next thing we're going to do, and just to simplify this, I'm going to send an email. So we on the left-hand side, I'm sending an email if we're approved. If we double-click on that, we're going to go to the initiator. So we'll take a look at this. Whoever filled out the form, I'm going to actually send them an email. So we'll go to the initiator. We're going to send them an email, and the subject is you have been approved. If I can spell approved right. And I don't know if I should say enjoy in case they're taking sick leave, is you have been approved. I'm just going to put that as a message down here. Maybe in the message I'll put something like the item properties. We know what kind, look at the right here, we have all the item properties, so I'm going to say leave type, you've been approved, and then we'll put the leave type behind that in the email. Okay. Next thing we might want to do is we might want to update a calendar. So I'm going to create an item in a team calendar. We'll send the email, then we're going to go ahead and create an item. And inside that item, I have a leave calendar, so I have that item. It knows about the leave calendar. So what I need to do is I need to select the properties here. So I need the end time, which is going to be the list lookup. I can say the current item, I need the end date. Start time, same thing, current item. I need the start date. So I'm just filling out. And what's the title? I want to put on the user's name. So let's go ahead and look at the workflow context. Initiator's display name. So watch this. I'm going to create a title by double-clicking initiator's display name. And then I'm going to put a dash, and then I'm going to go ahead in the item properties and say what type of time off they're taking, so leave type. So these are all the fields you have access to be able to create dynamic things here, and that's what we're basically doing. Now, I can also do an update item. So let me find the update item, update list item, and what I want to do with update list item is I want to come up here and I want to say the current item status, and I'm going to add that and say under review. And I want to do it one more time. We're going to update a list item, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the status again. And we're going to change it to approved. I'll go a step further. I'll put in the approver comments. We'll go into the workflow status. And if I was using the manager, not using my own display name, it wouldn't be initiator display name. You'd probably use the manager's display name. So when we see this come back, the status will actually have my real manager's name. So he's not going to get a message, but it's going to say it's approved by him. Okay, so let's go ahead and publish this and take a look at this. And we've created the full solution now. So it's saving the workflow, and it'll take a second here, and it'll publish it, and then once it publishes it, we'll have access to this workflow, and it'll start on creation. So sometimes this can take a little bit of time. The publishing a workflow, depending on the size of your workflow, can take 30 seconds or so. For some reason, I've seen this even in the simple ones can take upwards of 30 seconds. Sometimes can be a little bit annoying. But hopefully this will publish relatively quickly so I can show it to you, unless I did something wrong and it's hanging up because of that. But again, we're doing this all through the browser, and we'll see what's going on here. Now, one of the things, it's been approved there, so let me go ahead and take you to the actual time off request form. I'm going to leave that workflow open. So let's go ahead and do a new. I'm going to go with other. And we'll just go ahead and take the day off. I'm taking the day off because it's so nice out. And so what happens is you'll notice you also get a column that shows you the workflow based on how they want to display it to you. A lot of times what I do with this column is I basically hide this column because I already have status column. So you'll notice the first thing that we did in our workflow, if you take a look at the workflow, the first thing we did was an update item to say that we're under review. So you can see that we're under review right there, okay? So the next thing you're going to see is if we take a look, I'm opening up my email right now. Hang on one second. And I want you to see that here's the email that went to the manager, okay? So remember, I had to make myself the manager because I didn't want my real manager to think I'm taking all these days of time off. But what I wanted to show you is you do have this actionable items here, or actionable item that a user can take advantage of. So instead of replying, you'll see that at the bottom here, the task has been assigned to you, reply with the following on a line by itself at the top of the email. So I can say approve or rejected just by hitting reply. But one of the things about actionable messages is that I can just go ahead and hit approved right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit approved, and you'll notice that it's saying working on it, and it's gone all the way back. So now we've actually approved that as a manager, and we should see a couple things happen now. Now, once this workflow progresses, you can see that the workflow hasn't gotten far enough. It's still under review, and what we should be waiting for is an email coming through that will basically tell me, the person that filled out the actual form, that, hey, you've been approved or you've been rejected. So hopefully I filled that out correctly, and in a second here, we'll see an email come through that actually has that notification. The other thing that we'll notice is that when we go into the leave calendar, you'll notice that the leave calendar will have information on it, and it should be showing up on today's date down below on the right-hand side. So I haven't seen that come through yet. You know, the workflows are not instantaneous all the time. So if we take a look at this for time off requests, I'm still waiting for this. It's still under review, and if I want to, I can go in there and we can actually take a look at the workflow and see what's going on here. Why are we having a problem? Well, something went wrong with my workflow and it terminated, and I have no idea why. So this is one of the good things. I can go up here and say, okay, what happened? And exception, I have a permission issue inside a Nintex. So, something I did wasn't quite working correctly, and I have no idea. I've never seen that error before. But what you should have seen is, you know, we were going to update that list with this information, send an email, and then create the item. Probably what's going on there is that I don't have access to that list calendar, and it's bombing out because I don't have access to the leave calendar through this workflow for some reason. But unfortunately, that's how these demos usually go. Murphy's Law here. Let me go ahead and shift gears here, because that's basically what I wanted to show you. One of the things I wanted to get into here, and just taking a look at how people are using Nintex across different business processes here. So take a look here at some of the ways it's being used throughout, you know, in different groups within an organization. And like I said, a lot of these are things that we've done before. So we would have prototypes already built or something you can look at. There's also an extensive community within the Nintex environment of people using Nintex. One of the things that we do is we will give you free training, up to a couple hours of free training when you buy the product. But one of the great things that we offer is something called the Nintex JumpStart program. This is one of the reasons we've been such a successful Nintex partner, is that we give you basically 88 hours of development time. So if you look on the left-hand side right here, this 88 hours is meant to help you build out some of your projects, but we also do proof of concept. So if you're skeptical about Nintex, and wondering whether it can work for your company, what some people do is we can get you a 30-day free trial in Nintex. They always offer that to you. We can build on that 30-day free trial, and basically the biggest risk you're going to make is $3,900. We can build it, we can deploy it, but I will say this. When you look at doing something with Nintex, I cannot guarantee you that we can build a solution out in that amount of time. So I just want you to be aware of this 88 hours that you see on the left-hand side. This is a chunk of hours dedicated towards a solution. If you're doing something like what I was just showing you with time off reporting, we could probably do 1, 2, or 3 solutions for you. But you just need to be aware that some people come to us with like a very complex workflow, multi-level workflow. You might use 40 hours, you might require up to 120 hours. It just depends on the complexity. So what I usually tell people is try to shoot for something that has high visibility within your organization, that you can use these hours to build something that'll get a lot of eyeballs on it and make a lot of people happy. And you know, I think if you go that route, you'll be very successful with this product. The great thing about the licensing part, and if you need more information about licensing, please send me an email to alexv@netwoven. Here's my email down here if you want to have a licensing discussion. Licensing basically works based on subscription and how many solutions you create. So think if you create an expense reporting solution, time off reporting solution, those are 2 solutions. You basically pay on usage. The minimum level is 5 workflows for $7,500, so that gives you 5 solutions that you can build for $7,500 a year. That includes your maintenance, support, that includes everything you need to be able to do what I was showing you today. Okay? I will send out my slide deck to you after we're done here, and also they will post this recording on YouTube, but if you search for Alex Netwoven Nintex, I'm sure you'll find this presentation up there as well. But I want to thank you for your time today. I know your time's valuable. I hope you had a great holiday, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and or you can even send me an email, and if you need me to call you, I'll call you and we can discuss what needs to be done. Okay? Thank you very much. Take care.